I Love Mortgage Brokering, episode 20.
The only podcast for brokers by brokers. I Love Mortgage Brokering will inspire you to up your mortgage business. Join your host, Scott Peckford.
Hi, Broker Nation. I am thrilled to introduce our guest today, Dustan Woodhouse. Dustan is a mortgage broker with Canadian Mortgage Experts DLC. He's been a broker for 6 years and is based out of Vancouver, British Columbia. He's a number 16 broker in CMP Magazine's top 75. He's always keen to share his knowledge with our industry, and I'm absolutely stoked about this interview today. How are you doing today, Dustan?
Not too bad. I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
Cool. We were talking a little bit off the air, and I said, look, we got to get this thing going because you're sharing so much good stuff. I want everybody to be able to hear it. So I always like to start off, though, if you could just tell us a little bit about yourself and your business.
Well, I've been in the business 6 years, and I have one full-time assistant. Like most people, I waited a little too long to bring that assistant into the picture. She is a licensed broker and a little bit of a workaholic, much like myself, so it's been a great fit. I think that's been about four and a half years now that she's been working with me.
So it's in 6 years, you've really hit the ground running, because I can, most of the people that are in the top brokers, at least what I've seen, they've probably got 10 plus years under their belt. So how did you where did you come from to, what do you think it's some of your background that did that, or what made you get so big so fast?
Well, no, I mean, not specifically my background. My background was in running a mail-order, high-performance automotive parts business focused on Volkswagens and Audis. So not really a direct connection to the mortgage business at all. But I've always had a really aggressive work ethic and been a big proponent and believer in the 80-hour work week. And it's as simple in my mind as, if I work 80 hours at being good at something week after week after week, how can I not wind up good at it? It's you got to get results from that kind of effort. So throwing a massive amount of focused quality hours at something, that's always been the way I've approached things, and it was no different with brokering.
Right. So you're not a big fan of the 4-Hour Workweek by Tim Ferriss?
Love the book. I love the 4-Hour Body, the 4-Hour Chef. All great books. And he's also got a podcast going, I think, now that I just started listening to the first couple of. But yeah, the 4-Hour Workweek is great because I'm the kind of guy who reads a book like the 4-Hour Workweek. Okay, so there's how you pack 40 hours worth of work into 4 hours. Awesome. So if I do an 80-hour work week with that kind of focus, how productive is that going to be? Right.
And I'm convinced he works more than 4 hours a week too. So I think it was partially a marketing thing, and maybe there was a very brief period of time where he maybe, worked 4 hours a week, but I don't think that's the case anymore with even creating blog posts that he does. I mean, you can't do produce the content he produces in the time that in 4 hours a week.
No, but it's a great thing to aspire to.
Yeah, I agree. So I always like to begin every interview with a success quote, a quote that's kind of impacted your life or business. So can you share with us a quote that's really impacted you?
Yeah, and I kind of thought it was something my grandpa had always come up with, because I know he was one that used to throw it out there. Opportunity is missed by most people because it's dressed in overalls and looks like work. It was actually Thomas Edison who said that, apparently.
Yeah, I've heard that quote before. I love that quote. And a recurring theme that I've noticed in these interviews is that the really successful brokers, they're not afraid of hard work. And so you'd said that when you first started I always like to ask how you applied this quote, but when you first started, you're putting in 80 hours a week. Are you still doing 80 hours a week, or what's your rhythm like right now?
I tracked my hours very specifically in 2013. I know I've not deviated really a whole lot from the schedule I was working last year. Last year it was 3,696 hours. So it wasn't 80 hours a week, it was 71.7. And I'm not the guy you're going to interview about balance. I'm not going to talk to you about working 40 hours and time blocking and that sort of thing. That's not been my forte. It's probably my weakness. I am an unrepentant workaholic, and they say the first step in fixing a problem is realizing you have one. Well, I've realized it years ago, and the 80-hour work week is great in short bursts for a lot of people, and certainly for a brand new broker, to put that kind of, again, focused hours in. I'm not talking about sitting at a desk 16 hours a day twiddling your thumbs or, surfing YouTube or playing, Minecraft or something. I mean, attending every real estate related event, reading every real estate related publication, blog, book that you can get your hands on. That kind of focus for a year or two will absolutely launch your business. The challenge then is, of course, dialing it back, because it does become a little bit addictive. Mm-hmm. It's very hard, after answering every call, every email, every text as quickly as they come in, it becomes really hard to drop that level of service, because the other challenge with it is you attract other workaholics to you. So next thing you know, the realtors, the financial planners, the referral sources you're working with, they work at that same level, and we all tend to expect the same. We expect to be treated as we treat others, right?
Right. Yeah. I said to a friend the other day, we're constantly training people how to treat us, and so if you obviously you're quick and you're on the ball, then the people that are the same way are going to be like, dude, you got to work with this guy because he's going to take care of it. And then you end up with a whole bunch of a stable of realtors and referral sources that are that way. But it's not a bad thing, because obviously it works, and work is not a bad thing. Work is good.
No, but I would qualify my 80-hour work week comment this way at this point, based on what I've learned. I would say to somebody who's brand new, starting out, yeah, you need to put in huge hours and huge effort, but as far as making yourself available to clients, that you need to box into a specific zone. I'm available from 8 till 8, Monday to Friday, period. Something like that. And maybe you're still putting another 10 or 20 hours in on top of that, but you're doing focused work without the distraction of having to respond to calls and emails and that sort of thing. I've taken to using an out-of-office alert on the weekends, because that's a me thing. I put an out-of-office alert in every weekend, and it basically says I will review and respond to every email no later than 8 a.m. Monday morning. So by the time they wake up Monday morning, basically, they'll have an answer to their question. Although I include my phone number, if it's truly urgent, call me. My phone will be on. I maybe get one phone call over the course of a weekend.
Mm-hmm. And you're working on a lot of files.
And I do still tend to respond to a lot of those emails through the weekend.
Right. Okay. That's a really good way to frame that, the 80-hour work week. So one of the other things, the other thing I like to talk about is failure. So I know that me as a mortgage broker, as an entrepreneur, business owner, I have definitely made some mistakes over the years. And looking back, there's always a lesson, and I try to learn from them. And so can you share an example of something that maybe you failed at or something didn't work out the way you wanted, and then now and the lesson that you got from it?
Yeah. I would say... And it's a timely question, because last night, heading home, and this morning when I first woke up, I had the same file in my brain, and it's a file whose time has passed. It was a purchase. It closed yesterday. I lost it 3 business days before completion. So everything was done. Significant amount of hours invested, set up at the lawyer's office, and it made a U-turn on me in the 11th hour. And that doesn't happen very often. But, as I point out a lot of times when we try and talk about our wins in the office, but of course you can't help but talk about the ones like that where, boy, how did that go wrong? How did that happen? Trying to let those go. I fail at letting those go as fast as I should. I let them take up too much real estate in my brain, too much of my energy, too much of my focus, especially the ones that there's nothing I could have done differently. This one file in particular, both applicants work for a major chartered bank. And they were offered something completely uncompetitive all through the process. They purchased 10 weeks ago, And I was there for them at 8:30, 9 o'clock at night on a Sunday evening twice, and I really accommodated their schedule. First-time buyers, so a lot of comprehensive answers to many, many questions. And then in the 11th hour, their employer came to them and said, "We will do this for you," and put them in a position where they felt incredibly awkward not doing business with their own employer. It would have put them in a very tricky position. And I respected that. And, we broke up nicely, and they're absolutely planning on referring more business to me, and I believe they will. Now, if that business is fellow employees, that's going to be a little trickier because I don't want to go through that experience again. But as I say, I know that I'm still going to keep replaying that file over and over, and I shouldn't. I should just let that go and move on, because we still had a banner month. We closed more successful transactions last month than we have ever before in 6 years. So focus on your wins. Learn a very quick lesson from your failure. Tweak your process if you need to, and move forward.
So I'll just key in on this one particular deal you're talking about, because I agree with you. So you have a great month, and you forget about the other 20 or whatever loans you had that went through fine, and then this one that kind of went sideways at the last minute. So was there anything specifically that you thinking, looking back now, that you could make an adjustment to? Or, I mean, you're dealing with somebody who works at a bank. I have clients that work at banks too, and it's always a little awkward because of okay, well, anyway, it's an awkward situation. So is there anything specifically you can tweak?
Well, I'm crafting an email to these clients. I'm going to ask a few specific questions. I mean, as I say, lovely people, and I know they felt horrible. It was a very hard phone call for them to make. But I'm going to ask them specific questions. And what I'd like to be able to do is, and I have worked with a half a dozen people out of the head office of this lender, and this is the first time it's gone this way. But I want to try and figure out what's changed, and if there's some new person that is involved in the transaction at some point in head office, like when did they come into the picture and when did they come in this aggressively? And if I get a call from another person working in that head office in particular, but really in any head office, can I say to them, how about I draft up a letter? And this is what I do for all my renewals. So here's a piece of my process. With all my renewals, because lenders are so competitive on retention, not initially, of course, they send that crazy letter out with, posted rates. But once they know that the client's shopping around, very aggressive. So I'm wondering if with these sorts of purchase transactions, I can't apply the same principles I do to a renewal, which is to outline my process. You will not pay for an appraisal. There will be if it's a switch, there'd be no legal fees, et cetera. Outline those details clearly. And here are the rates of the day. And those rates, of course, are a collection of rates from sometimes 3, 4, 5 different lenders. But here are the best, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and variable rates. And, take that down the hall to the person that's going to show up 3 days before completion and offer you a deal. Take it to them now. And, work with them right out of the gates. And like I say, I do that with renewals. I mean, if you love something, set it free. Well, I love my clients, but I'm going to set them free. Because if it's only about rate, that the current lender they're with will 9 times out of 10 match or beat any rate that you're going to be able to offer. So switching a client from one lender to another, sort of segueing a little bit, you can't make that happen based on rate. It's got to be based on a product feature, a service. There's got to be some other thing in the equation.
A strategy
that rate, you'll almost certainly strategic planning, something we focus on. So I do make it about rate right up front. Here's the rates. And if the client is all about rate and their lender is all about rate, well, the two of them can go have a happy relationship right away. I've only invested 15, 20 minutes in the conversation. I've hopefully got all their details. I've put them into my automated system, so I'm going to stay in touch with them moving forward, and hopefully they'll really appreciate what I just did for them. And so they may still turn into a quality referral source. You may still wind up dealing with them at the next renewal. But you're keeping that relationship alive, but you're ending the process of the transaction up front. And really, that's probably my biggest focus this year, is how can I lose deals as quickly as possible.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome.
Like if it's going to go wrong, let's have it go wrong right away.
Right. I think that'll be the title for this podcast. That's so it's anti what we would expect to hear, right? Like you, as a mortgage broker, it's like that sounds like sacrilegious. So that's awesome.
But it's not lose the client.
Right. That's a really good. Oh, that's good. Yes.
Yeah. Gain clients, lose files.
Okay, so I'm going to switch gears here and talk about process. Although we've already been talking about process, because I know this is what I love about this conversation already. But can you share a specific administrative process that you have in your office and how you maybe wasn't working the way you want, how you tweaked it, and what sort of outcome you got?
Yeah, I've got one that just bit us recently on 3 separate files. And unfortunately, one of them, it was an 11th hour thing. It triggered the process to be implemented across all existing files, and it basically killed 2 other files, but it killed them early in the game. And that is pulling a title search. Real easy to get a Landcore account, a BC Online account, either or, and pulling title searches is fantastic. Are all the applicants actually on title? For a refinance or a switch, you need to see that title. There's any number of things that can come up. Certificate of pending litigation, because it turns out they're actually in the middle of a divorce that they didn't tell you about. Registrations from the municipality because the property had an illegal addition put on it that needs to be taken off. Well, a lender won't lend on a property that's got title branded that way. And when is that going to come up? That's going to come up at the lawyer's office after you've done everything. That's not acceptable for the sake of $10 or whatever it costs. I don't even know exactly what it costs for a title search. It's the best $10 you could spend, because again, it goes back to losing that file before you put all that work into it. If you're going to lose it anyway, lose it fast. CRA arrears is another one that'll pop up. You have CRA registered on there for $80,000, and you can only get $20,000 new money out there. And clients, these are things sometimes deeply personal they don't want to tell you about. And then there's also the things they just forget about. A deceased spouse from 10 years earlier, still on title. You got to get that addressed. Mm-hmm. And again, it's timing. So if they're with a lender that does not renew into an open, and you don't have this come up until the 11th hour, you might not have time to fix that and still hang on to the file.
Right. You've convinced me. I know that off the air we were chatting about this briefly, and I was kind of griping about the fact that it costs $10, but I've actually can think back over the last 2 months, and there's deals that have blown up because of this. And if I think about the time I spent and the, phone calls and the meetings and just oh man, like $10 is a deal for that, to get all that time back. So I'm completely convinced and converted to your way of thinking. I will pull them from going forward, and I think it's a really good practice.
And look, just full disclosure on this topic. I mean, the reason we had stopped was, of course, my direction. 150 files later, no issues. It's like $1,500. Let's just stop pulling titles for a while. And 60 files later, boom, 3.
Right.
So we're back on that task, and we're not going to deviate from it moving forward.
That's awesome. That's really good advice. And so now I'm going to switch to sales process, because I also noticed that successful brokers have a sales process. It's not just random, and they don't just show up and hope for the best. And so you must have a sales process. Can you share an example of a part of your sales process that maybe wasn't working as well as you'd like, and an adjustment you made, and what kind of outcome you got?
Yeah. I remember somewhat vividly the phone call I was on with a client, and it was like the clouds parted and the blue sky and sun came out, and it was just amazing. Like it was a revelation. And it was a client who, it was probably my 9th deal into the business. So right in the very beginning, great time to learn this lesson too. And we're struggling to try and find a time to meet. And why are we struggling to try and find a time to meet? Why are we planning on meeting? Well, because the client asked to meet. So of course, the client wants to meet, usually, especially in the early days. I will meet you anywhere at any time because I'm super available. That you are, because you don't have any other files you're working on. So you're willing to you drive to the end of the earth to meet this client. But it just wasn't working timing wise. And I said, well, really, I mean, if you want to jump on it right now, I guess I could actually input everything over the telephone. And I remember thinking like, gee, I wonder if I'm even allowed to do it this way.
That's awesome.
Something that had been talked about in my brokerage. And I said, I can key everything in right now. I can email you the client consent to pull the credit bureau. And he's like, yeah, I can print it, sign it, and email it back right now. I'm like, okay. So I started typing that up and quickly emailed that to him. And we built the whole application over the telephone. It was about an hour-long telephone call. By the end of it, the whole file was built. The whole plan was established. We knew which lender we were going to, which product it was going to be happening. And I hit the submit button and it was done. And I remember sitting back going, wow, like an hour, and it's done from the initial phone call. And I embraced that and have run with that and refined that to the point that my goal is within the first 10 minutes of the conversation to have the client say something along the lines of, nobody's ever told me that before. Like it doesn't matter how many mortgages they've had, how many properties they've owned. That's what I'm looking for. Wow, no one's ever given me that piece of information before. Let's move forward. And then within 15 minutes, ideally 20 at the most, date of birth, SIN number, everything is going in from this complete stranger who I've never spoken to previously.
Right.
And again, within 45 to 60 minutes, we've built the initial framework. It's established enough that we know which lender we're going to, pretty good feeling about which product we're moving forward on. Sometimes there's a tweak to that later in the game. But again, hitting the submit button, off to the races.
Right. That's awesome. I'm processing this because it's not how I currently do things. So I'm gonna go back after. I always listen to these interviews because I always get a lot from them the second time, and so I'm gonna go back, and that's definitely one of the things I'll be looking at is my initial application gathering process. So I think that's fantastic, and it allows you to be you're very productive with your time because you in that first hour you've got a lot done. You hang up the phone and you got the application, you got to sign consent. So it's pretty awesome. So,
and every broker has driven an hour, sat for 2 hours with a lovely couple, worked out a master plan with them, everything's figured out, driven an hour back home, been so excited about the file, sat for another half hour transferring all the data in, pulled up the credit reports, 422, 479 beacon scores. What?
Yeah.
Where did that come from? Like every broker who's been in the game, even just a little while, has a story along those lines. And that is, as I say, the number one thing I wanted to avoid. That story, unfortunately, came about 6 months later for me. So I still wasn't 100% dedicated telephone guy. But, you have a few of those happen, and very quickly you stop getting in your car and racing across the city to meet people. There isn't the time once you get busy enough to be doing that. And it just doesn't make sense. I mean, you can't have an intelligent conversation with a client about what you can do for them if you don't have those credit reports and all their data up front.
Right. Yeah, I agree. I've had people want to meet with me, and that's I usually require an application 9 times out of 10 before I'll even meet face to face because I just need to see where they're at. Because if it's really off, then you can deal with it, initially. But yeah, there's still been times people have got through my defenses, and I meet with them, pull their credit, and go, oh my goodness, and you can still help them, you still serve them, but you're obviously, it's a different conversation than if you once you know that up front. So
that's right. You might be serving them 2 years from now.
Right. So, okay, another part of the thing I like to talk about is diversifying your income. So there's been a lot of talk in our industry about sort of the need to diversify. There's commission, pressure. So I want to ask your thoughts on diversification. Do you think it's something you're looking at doing? If you're looking at doing it, what are you going to do? And if not, why not?
Perhaps I'm a bit of a contrarian on this topic as well, but I don't see a need for any broker really to be radically focused, certainly, really even lightly focused on diversifying the income per se. One of the things I struggle with in my own life is taking the advice that I'm giving to my clients, taking the advice that the clients are being given in the first place when they call me, and that is use an independent expert in that field. So I'm not going to become a licensed realtor, a certified financial planner, a licensed insurance agent. I'm not going to become any of those things, because I think if you look across any industry and you look at the top 20, the top 100, the top 1,000 in that industry, it is an exceedingly rare individual that is operating in two different fields. And certainly you're not going to find somebody who's in the top 100 of both disciplines. So could I make a little more money selling additional insurance products or, taking on wealth management? Sure, I suppose I could, but it's not about making money. The money can never be the main driver. So long as the basic needs are met, whatever's coming in on top of that, that's great. That can go to the long-term wealth building plan. But to try and be a jack of all trades when a client walks through the door is not who I want to be. I want to be able to introduce them to other independent experts who focus completely on that field. So, and again, in doing that, like my certified financial planner, I refer a lot of my clients to them. I have a couple different guys that I work with, and I refer almost all my clients typically to them for an insurance review. Now, maybe they've taken the life or the disability product that I'm offering because there are certain strategic reasons to take that product, i.e., you have no insurance whatsoever, you're a first-time buyer, you're the sole breadwinner in the family, you're putting a non-refundable $25,000 deposit on the line, and there's a $500,000 mortgage that's got to be funded in 6 weeks. Well, here's this insurance I'm putting in front of you that is fully refundable if you cancel it in the first 2 months anyway. You don't have any life insurance, and what happens between now and the closing date if something happens to you? So, sure, I put my insurance salesman hat on, I guess, in a situation like that, but I ultimately like to refer those people out to an independent expert who then gives them a different analysis, because actually, they've got access to multiple different suppliers, just as I have. So I'm basically giving my client the same advice they were given that brought them to me. Mm-hmm. And in turn, that insurance, or certified financial planner typically that I'm dealing with, he winds up with new clients in his orbit that he then refers back to me. So I'm not taking a piece of his commission, whatever he makes, and then he sends clients my way, and same story. I'm not paying a referral fee back to him. We just trade leads back and forth. And again, I wind up so busy processing mortgage transactions, I can't imagine trying to learn another discipline on top of that.
Right. Yeah. No, that's good. So another thing I find too, I think you kind of already answered this, but so how do you run, your mortgage practice, and how do you balance a mortgage practice and family? I know that you talked about it briefly, but 19 years of marriage later, we're still going strong. How can that be? I guess an amazing wife, amazingly tolerant wife. I go back 20 years and we looked at each other and I said, I had a stay-at-home mom and I loved that.
And she said I had a working mom, and I didn't love it all the time. And we sort of said, okay, well, do you want to stay home with the kids for the next few years, or however long that turns into? And so we had that division of labor in our household, and we'd say to the kids, Mom and Dad could both go work 35 hours a week each, and you can do the daycare thing like the rest of the kids on the street, or Mom can stay home with you guys, and Dad can go work 70 hours a week. What do you think? And they were like, "Go to work, Dad."
Yeah, we'll miss you. Bye.
Yeah, we love you, and we'll see you later.
Yeah,
goodbye. And so that works. Again, have I taken this 80-hour work week concept a little too far? Absolutely. Do I need to dial it back? Yes, I do. And I don't know. You can re-interview me next year and see if I've gotten any further on that topic. But I'm absolutely learning how to say no to a lot of things, business-wise, that is, and trying to say no a lot less on the family side. But balance, I hate the word. It's an exceedingly difficult thing for anybody to achieve. And, if you want to be number one dad and you want to be number one broker, I'm not going to say they're mutually exclusive, but again, much like my comment about wearing two hats in industry, it's pretty tough to be a top performer all the way around. But I've had the benefit of being a pretty energetic person, and I like my afternoon naps on the weekend, absolutely. But for the most part, when I'm home and I'm engaged with my family, I'm engaged with my family, and that's it's the quality of the time as much as it is the quantity of the time.
Right. Okay. Well, awesome. So I want to move to the rapid fire questions now, and you can answer these little shorter answers. So, what is the number one thing holding most mortgage brokers back from being successful?
I would say themselves. We're all capable of a lot more than we think we are.
And what one habit or thing do you think has made you successful over your 6 years?
Tenacity. I mean, again, just the ability to put the time in, and probably ignoring the doubters. Not that there's a lot of doubters in my life. I don't surround myself with negativity. That's a bad game plan. But the self-doubt. When you're wondering if you can do it, stop wondering. You can do it. You'll be fine. Go do it.
So like Nike said, just do it.
Exactly.
So do you have an internet resource software program that you use to make your business more successful?
The easy answer would be to circle back to Landcore or BC Online. And they really are amazing tools to have. To give the host company a plug, Dominion Lending has fantastic client manager software, and I do try and tune in with that regularly because it keeps me up to speed on my renewal dates, everything else, which is vital. I mean, you got to be contacting a client 6 months out these days, because if you're not, the current lender is.
Mm-hmm. If you could recommend one book,
and as I say, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, yeah, you keep going. I was going to ask you about the book, but go first.
No, I was just going to say on that note too. I mean, again, it isn't even necessarily about your ability to move that client from one lender to another. You want to reach out to them early because at least you can facilitate a smoother renewal process. Even if it's with the existing lender, you still get in there. You have a little more client interaction. Anyway, back to the rapid fire part. Sorry.
So, yeah, that's okay. So if you could recommend a book for our listeners, what would it be?
One book that I've been circling back to has been the Millionaire Real Estate Agent, the Gary Keller book. Great book. Almost makes me want to be a realtor some days. But there's a ton of principles in there that really apply to brokering. And I've read the book twice. I've got it on audio book. I've probably listened to it 3 times over the last 3-4 years. There's just a wealth of information in there that really does cross over and apply to brokering.
Okay, that's one I haven't read, so I'll have to check that one out. And so where do you think our industry's headed? Where's the opportunity?
I think that there's absolutely going to continue to be change. Everybody always talks about pending changes in the industry, but within those changes, there's always opportunity. Are we going to lose lenders? Is commission going to be cut? Compensation level is going to be cut? Potentially. But I think that even if those things happen, there's just that much more opportunity, because you'll get a lot of people who will throw their hands in the air and leave the business. But ultimately, I think the biggest opportunity is with renewals. I mean, what is it? The statistics I've seen are something like 70% of clients sign with their existing lender without even shopping around. Mm-hmm. And again, that is a huge number. It's hundreds of thousands of people with whom we're not interacting. And again, maybe we're not winning that file, but maybe you're winning that client.
Right, and then they become a referral source to you.
Exactly.
Now I want to jump to one of my favorite questions, the DeLorean question. Remember the movie Back to the Future?
Absolutely.
And so in the movie Back to the Future is that car, the DeLorean, that can travel in time. So if you can imagine, if you can get in that car and you could choose one time to travel back to, and I'm going to set it at your first day as a mortgage broker, and you're going to travel back and visit yourself. And the idea is to give yourself 3 pieces of advice that would make your business better today. So what 3 things would you tell yourself if you could get in this DeLorean?
Well, I'd probably stick to my 80-hour work week routine right out of the gates, but I would fine-tune it a little differently, and I would set my hours of availability a little more firmly. Whether it's 8 till 8 Monday to Friday or something, because setting boundaries for my own availability is not something that I really have done even to this point. I'm still sort of just taking the baby steps on that topic. And so, as I say, definitely setting the bar a little lower for availability, I think, would probably have been a smart move. Because once you get recognized for being the one that answers his phone at 6 a.m. Sunday morning and 11 p.m. Saturday night, you start getting a few extra calls during those hours. Mm-hmm. That's probably the first thing I'd do. Another second thing I'd say is hire a licensed assistant sooner. And I stress licensed because I think that it shows a certain level of dedication to the industry, that person has taken the time to become licensed. There's a whole conversation, I guess, around whether you're training your future competition, and you have to sort of address that. But as I say, sooner than I did. Build it and they will come a little bit is kind of the mentality I think brokers should take. Because if you wait until you're so busy, you're overwhelmed, you're going to do a poor job hiring the right assistant. I got very lucky. I got a fantastic assistant, and it's worked out brilliantly. And probably the last thing I'd say is have a structured, automated, detailed CRM system in place right from day one. And that piece of advice was given to me, I think, in my first month brokering. I did follow up on it to some extent, but I didn't take it to heart as I should have. And so, 3-4 years in, I'm still adding multiple fields to my tracking sheet and still following up on different things, which I should have had that framework built right from the very beginning.
So
I'd say those are probably the top 3.
Top 3. So you'd have a structured 80-hour work week, which for some people, they'll fall out of their chair when they hear that, but have some limits on it. The second thing would be get a licensed assistant sooner before you're overwhelmed and unable to sort of make as good of a decision. And then the last would be to have a detailed CRM. And that one has been coming up a lot. And I've talked to a couple of brokers that are fairly new recently, and they kind of still don't see it. They're kind of like, well, I only have a handful of clients. And I agree with you that that's something that is such a huge missed opportunity if you don't start it now. Like, just do it right from the beginning, and you won't have to go back and try to fix it.
Well, the biggest part of that third and final item that we talked about there is the habit. So it's the habit of inputting. As I say, I've got an Excel sheet that I use to track a lot of metrics and details, and some of the fields I've added. Did they take the life insurance? Did they take the disability insurance? Because when you get that phone call from the client or the client's family member who's been, disabled or something's happened, you want to have that answer at your fingertips. Mm-hmm. Is the mortgage insured? If so, which insurer? And make sure you're detailing that out. And having all of that data at your fingertips is very, very helpful. When they're porting that mortgage over 3 years later to a new property, which insurer was it with? And it saves you, 15 minutes of tracking down exactly which insurer it was with. And just, as I say, a number of those little things, but creating those habits of inputting that data when you've only got one deal closing in the month, it's a lot easier than trying to create those new habits when you suddenly have, 3 deals a week closing. It becomes much more difficult to break in, as I say, to break the old habits and form new ones.
Mm-hmm. So it's a lot of it's just about setting proper habits right from the beginning.
Exactly.
Well, Dustan, I have really enjoyed this interview today, and I'm sure that our listeners are going to get a lot of value from it. If people are looking for you online, where can they find you?
My personal website is dustanwoodhouse.ca, and my broker-to-broker blog is found at ourexpert.ca.
And if any of our listeners are looking for any of the links that we talked about or links to Dustan's website, they can go to ilovemortgagebrokering.com. There's show notes there. They can check out all of the notes. Dustan, I've really appreciated your time, and I hope you rock the rest of your year.
I appreciate the opportunity, and you do the same.
The only podcast for brokers by brokers. I Love Mortgage Brokering will inspire you to up your mortgage business. Join your host, Scott Peckford.
Hi, Broker Nation. If you enjoyed this interview, please take a minute, visit iTunes, and rate this podcast. If you do, you'll get 3 deals in the next month. Okay, that's not true, but I would really appreciate it. Also, I want to invite you to join me on a quest. After every episode, I personally take 5 minutes and think about one thing or one idea I can use to improve my mortgage business. I encourage you to do the same. Over the next 12 months, I plan to do 100 interviews and make 100 improvements. I'm going to track these to see how they impact my business and, more importantly, my bottom line. Visit ilovemortgagebrokering.com and post in the show notes what one thing you plan to do differently after listening to this interview, and check out what other brokers are sharing. Also, if you'd like to connect with me, fire me an email at scott@robyourbank.com. I love hearing from passionate mortgage professionals who are interested in improving their business. Until next time, rock on.